little ahead of time. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about fortune telling. And I'd like to start off with a little introduction about me, I guess, a little bit. My job is I'm the CFO of a company. We purchase airplanes. We disassemble them. We sell the parts. That's what we do. So obviously we do a lot of modeling on these planes. We look at them now. Planes could be anything. These are 747, 737, 777 big planes. So a lot of money's on the line when you forecast these things. But we look at the business themselves, what the plane is, how long they've been flying, what kind of life they have. We have all these complicated models based on historical data, based on current market trends, and we can get pretty precise of where the parts are going to sell in the marketplace. It's called forecasting. I'm the CFO, so my job is to take these business models that we put together for each project, assemble them, and run out a plan. Maybe look at the next 3 months, what we're going to do for the next quarter, what we're going to do for the next year, what we're going to do 5 years down the road. Okay? Where are we going to get the money to buy these planes, that kind of stuff. And so I put together these projections and have a pretty extensive modeling process to forecast out our business, to predict our business. It is based on historical patterns. It's based on current market trends. With that, of course, comes the statistical risk. Because when we use the mathematical models, it could be off by 1 or 2 deviations, standard deviations. I'm way too deep into the math here. Get back up. Obviously, that's not fortune telling. All my projections are if we continue this way, if the market holds this way, this is where we see it coming. I do a lot of hedging in it. Have to. And it's understood that it's just a forecast. It's based on statistical models. It's not fortune telling. Don't hold it out that it's going to happen exactly that way. Tell you about a neat little project we got going on right now. We've got 20 years of data. Okay, we know from the airlines. We know who's flying what plane. We have contacts with those guys. We know when they're going to retire. You know, when they're coming up for their scheduled seat checks. We got all this information on the business together. What we don't have is someone saying, I'm going to take it for disassembly today. We've got it to a point now where someone can make a phone call to us. The guy sitting at the desk can make a button, push a button, come out with a projection and say, your plane, if you take it to disassembly, is going to be worth this much money. In a matter of a phone call, when it used to take months to come up with a model like that. Precise, yes. Accurate, pretty close. Fortune telling, no. What about weathermen? Okay, how about them? Well, we might think they're fortune tellers. They miss a lot, right? But they're doing the same thing. They're looking at wind patterns, they're looking at ocean movements, they're looking at jet streams, how the front's moving, predicting what's going to happen based on what's happened in the past, where they think it's going to happen now, and the direction it's going, and they come up with a projection. They miss it a lot. Wish I could have their variations and be allowed to live with that, but I can't. But it's still not fortune telling. Fortune telling. Remember Jane Seymour, Dr. Quinn Menachem? Probably not. She was, before she became Dr. Quinn Menachem Woman, she was solitary in James Bond film Live and Let Die. And her role was fortune telling, and specifically reading tarot cards. Okay? And there's one scene in there where she turns over James Bond's card, and it's death. Okay, so he's going to die. All right? And then he has her turn over her card. And her card is the one of lovers, okay? And I don't like so much the message of the movie, but I like how it pauses right there at the point, because she's there, she's reading the card, she turns it over and she stops and has to look and consider it. Does she believe in her ability to tell the fortune? If so, that card's going to come true. What does it mean for her? And of course the movie's, you know, it's a typical James Bond movie. His future doesn't come to pass, but hers does. That is fortune telling. That is fortune telling. You know, men have frequently used various methods to foretell the future. The idea is that a special gift is endowed, that certain people are endowed with a special gift to read something and divine something about the future. It may be astrology. It may be reading the palms, the tarot cards. It may be the woolly worms that you see across the street. Okay? In my business, we kind of poke fun at fortune telling because when we do all these forecasts, we call it reading the tea leaves. Okay? But there is actually a fortune telling process where they read tea leaves. And of course, the chicken bones, how the chicken bones fall, is fortune telling. The irony of all this is that people consult these mediums to rely on their lives, and ignore the actual events that are going to come that have been foretold by the one who always gets it right, God. Okay. As we go through this lesson, I want to save some time at the end, and we want to look about God's book, what He's told for mankind. Okay. It's very plain. We'll look at the history of God's forecast, His fortunes, what He tells is going to happen. 100% of the time, it comes to pass. We'll go to the person that's got the tarot card and read it over. I was getting dressed this morning. Just had the TV on, and there Danny DeVito was in the back of the car reading a tarot card. It's everywhere, okay? It's everywhere, it seems like. People depend upon that fortune, rely upon that, what it says, ignoring God's word, which is 100% accurate. God's word is 100% accurate. And I want to stress that as we go through this lesson this morning. Let's turn to Genesis chapter 41. That's Brother Rufus.
Since you've gone into detail on some of that, what about dreams?
Well, that's actually where we're at right now.
Okay.
That's where we're at right now. Dreams.
I mean, I don't use them to go out and buy a lottery ticket like people used to do when I was a boy growing up. I'm just saying. But there's a lot of belief in that system.
Yeah. I dreamed that last night, so it's coming true at some point. What does that dream really mean? Yeah. I always had that question. Genesis 41. I can tell I'm in trouble. I've got my Bible, but I don't have my glasses. This may be I think this is the first time we encounter this idea of fortune tellers in the Bible. It's definitely the most lengthy passage at first that we first encounter it. But it came to pass at the end of 2 full years, verse 1, that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine, and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and the lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. And he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. Okay. And he sent, and he called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto him. So here he is. He's had this dream. We know how it goes. It's the 7 fat cows come up. 7 thin cows come up after them. They eat the fat cows. And after they've eaten, you can't tell that they've eaten anything, right? And then you have the full 7 years of full corn, full ears of corn, okay? 7 thin ears of corn come up. They eat those, the full ears of corn. You can't tell that they've done anything, okay? What does it mean? Who's going to tell him the dream? He goes to his magicians, his wise men, okay? His fortune tellers, okay? They're not able to tell him the dream. Who tells him this dream? Who's able to interpret it for him? Joseph. Why is Joseph able to interpret this dream for Pharaoh?
God made him able.
God. Yeah. Verse 16. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Okay. He's troubled. He needs an answer. What does this dream mean? God, through Joseph, reveals the dream to Pharaoh. Okay? There's going to be 7 years of plenty. After those 7 years of plenty, there's going to be 7 years of famine. Okay? So much so that they'll forget about the plenty that happened. Okay? And Joseph recommends that they prepare themselves, right, for the years of famine. And we know how it goes. He's made second ruler of Egypt at that point in time, and he prepares Egypt for the famine that's to come. Okay. Fortune telling. We have another encounter. Let's turn over to 1 Samuel chapter 28. Start verse 8. But Saul used to, the kings of Israel used to rely upon the priests to give them the message of God, to tell them what would happen. It's Urim and Thummim. Is that the Urim and Thummim? Yeah, Urim and Thummim. They would cast and figure out how the future was going. Okay. Well, God wasn't giving the answer to Saul anymore, because God had anointed David to be king. Okay, the kingdom had been ripped from Saul and was going to be given to David as king. So Saul didn't know what was going to happen. The Philistines are amassing an army. They're going to battle him. He's troubled. How do I get this resolved? What do I do? So he goes around, and this is verse 8. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment, and he went, and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night, and he said, "I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up, whom I shall name unto thee." Okay, who's this woman? Who's the spiritualist? Yes. Well, we know her. Sits there, the witch of Endor. Yeah. Yeah, she's one of the 7 witches. No, that's something else. No. Yeah, she's the witch of Endor, okay? She's worried because she's not supposed to be doing this, right? Saul had thrown out all the witches, okay? But she was still there practicing. And that's what verse 9 says. And the woman said unto him, "Behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that have familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life to cause me to die?" And Saul sware to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. And the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up unto thee?" And he said, "Bring me up Samuel." Okay. Does this woman know what she's doing? Is she able to conjure up Samuel?
Samuel don't like it.
Samuel doesn't like it. Yeah. I like how the Old Testament, it's kind of humorous as you read through it, but at the same time, when you think back on it, her game was masquerade, okay? It was falsified things. Now here's somebody specific she's got to tell this other person who at this point in time she doesn't realize is Saul, okay? She's got to tell him the words from Samuel, okay? She may have met Samuel at some point in time. She may have known who Samuel, well, she knew who Samuel was, no question about that. She may have known what he would have said, but to actually answer specific questions to this guy, she's out there as far as being a witch and being a fortune teller. She's at risk of revealing that she doesn't, her job is just fake and forgery. But the Bible doesn't leave us in doubt about that. Verse 12. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. It scared her to death. She saw Samuel. I'm not able to do this. What's he doing here? Okay. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, Be not afraid for what thou sawest. And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? And she said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground, and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, Why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me. God is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee up, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. Okay, now Samuel had already told Saul what was going to happen. Okay, he already told Saul that the kingdom had been wrested from him and given to another. Okay, so the fortune's already been told, but Samuel's going to retell it. Then said Samuel, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord has departed from thee, and is become thine enemy? And the Lord hath done to him as he hath spake by me. For the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand, and given it to thy neighbor, even to David. Because thou obeyedest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. And the Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Okay? And then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all that day or all that night. Still the same message that he spoke to him a little earlier, okay? But this time it has more meaning to him because the day of reckoning is tomorrow, okay? And you can read through verse 28, chapter 28, chapter 29. Saul does die the next day in battle. All his sons are killed except Ishbosheth. I said his name right. We're not done with the Bible and soothsayers. Nebuchadnezzar's court in Babylon, okay, as well as the succeeding kings from him, also had fortune tellers. Daniel chapter 2. Remember that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed this dream, right? This great image. Had the gold head, the feet partly of clay and iron, okay, and the stone was cut without hands. Out of the mountain comes down and knocks it over, okay? Verse 2 of chapter 2 of Daniel calls all magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. Now Nebuchadnezzar has a different slant on it, okay? tell me the dream. Not just the interpretation, tell me the dream. He knew the guys were charlatans. Is that how you say it? Charlatans, yeah. Thanks. He knew that. So tell me the dream. If you tell me the dream, then I'll know you're telling me the right interpretation. Obviously, they weren't able to tell the dream. And so he ordered that they all be killed. Okay? But then Daniel came and gave the interpretation from God of what that dream was. Daniel chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar again has another dream. Okay, this is about the Great Tree. It's built up. It's cut down. The same pattern that he followed in chapter 2. Okay? He calls all the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans. Tell me, what does it mean? And soothsayers, they couldn't. But Daniel came and gave the interpretation from God. Daniel 5 is an actual event that happens. Belshazzar is there with drinking the wine and toasting their gods, right? The finger of God appears and writes on the wall. Okay? He doesn't call Daniel. He doesn't consult with God. He calls the magicians, the wise men, the Chaldeans, the whatever they are, astrologers, sorcerers, soothsayers. Okay? They couldn't. You know, the language is right there. Okay? Daniel comes in and gives them the interpretation of the languages written on the wall. Okay. That's just the introduction. How did I do that? Last week it was 10 minutes, and this week it's 25 minutes. Okay, we'll have to fly. History of fortune telling. Okay. Macmillan in his book picks up with it in the Mesopotamian region. We've already talked about that with the Chaldeans. It's a natural outgrowth of astrology. Their idea was that the smaller stars indicated the lives of common men. They also went into the practice of reading sheep livers. Okay? Their idea was that the sheep liver was the center part of the universe. Okay? And contain the secret of life. Excuse me. We actually have in Ezekiel chapter 21, verse 21, an account where the king of Babylon comes to the parting of the ways, right? And in that passage it talks about he uses divination to determine which way to go. Okay? He looks at the arrows, makes his arrows bright. He also, what else does he do? He consults with the images. He looks into the liver, okay, to determine which way to go. Later on in the kingdom, as Babylon grew, they developed more sleight of hand trickery as a tool for the unscrupulous. In other words, they come up with an idea from that. The Greeks were a little bit more sophisticated with their methods. God spoke directly to certain priests at certain dedicated temples, okay? And so you had the oracles delivered by Zeus at the temples of Dodona and Delphi. You may hear the term a lot of times, Oracle of Delphi. That's where it comes from. Okay. They look for signs and omens to guide them in their decisions. The Egyptians, they had several things, but one of the things, they used bowls of water, drops of oil. And as the mist would rise, so would Anubis, the god of death, would appear and impart guidance to them. The Romans relied heavily upon divination. It actually established a college of Agors in 265 BC. 9 men. They communicated directly with the gods. They determined the warnings and advice of the gods through natural signs, omens, and divinations. They were actually the state guardians of science. Okay? Nostradamus. You guys heard of him? Maybe, maybe not. He's a French physician, lived around the 1500s, I think 1503 to 1563 BC. Wrote a book called The Prophecies, Propheties, and it's one that supposedly looks at signs and events and predicts world calamities that would happen in the future. And mainly today through misinterpretation, we still try to fit his prophecies into events that have happened recently. There's similar men and women throughout the ages that have done the same thing. Specific items of fortune telling. We have the tarot cards. They arose out of Egypt. Initially, their extensive symbolism was from Egyptian religion and mythology. Later, they combined some of the Greek and Hebrew mystical traditions in them. King Charles of France, King Charles VI of France, uses entertainment. King Edward IV forbade their use in England, but it still persisted among the gypsies. Today's deck that most people use was developed by the Frenchman Gibelin around 1773 AD. The next method is scrying or crystal gazing. Egypt, Assyria, Persia, South Africa, and Rome used it as a method to ascertain the will of the gods. The Mayan Indians and the Cherokee Indians did a little rendition on that. They would use polished stones as opposed to crystals for the same purpose. And then about the 4th century, the Franks and the Saxons actually abandoned just crystals and went with the crystal ball, okay, that we know of today. Palmistry. It's originated in India before the time of Christ. I didn't bring my die. But casting of dice is used by Egyptians and Romans. They call it, the Romans called it a lot of mercury, and it was the idea that to have the gods, to allow the gods to have their will. Cast the dice and cast the lots, and that determined how things would happen. You notice a lot of the, as we go through this, there's a lot of things in these mystical ideas that are very akin to religious things that happen, religious practices. And you see that a lot. I don't have anything about the chicken bones, but that really kind of grew out of Buddhism, okay, and so forth. And you also have I Ching, which developed in China around 600 BC as another method. Okay, it's kind of, I was going to spend some time going through the tarot card example. Kind of lengthy. I'll try to shorten it just a little bit because I do want to talk about it and then get into the early church or Christian response. Okay. Tarot cards. Now, I'm sure I'm saying that totally wrong, but they're among the most appealing forms of fortune telling for the modern public. Some experts claim that all wisdom resides within the self, and the cards only symbolize that wisdom. In other words, you have all the wisdom in the cards, you cast in the cards, pick them out, you're imparting that wisdom. It's coming out of you through the selection of the cards. The believers claim that the deck broadens one's knowledge of his spiritual self on a universal scale. Okay, it's comprised of 78 cards, which are divided into 2 smaller decks. The first, known as the Major Arcana, contains 22 cards, which reflect the mythology from Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, and others. Okay, the 22 major cards are known as trumps. The first card is unnumbered and is known as the Fool. It symbolizes wisdom or foolishness. In other words, you use it how you want to. Number 1, the Magician. Suggests courage and new things and new ideas. Number 2 is the Priestess. Represents unseen forces and powers. Number 3, the Empress. Symbolizes success as a result of ambition and labor. Number 4, the Emperor. Shows determination and courage. Number 5, the High Priest. Symbolizes wisdom. Number 6, the lovers represents romance. Number 7, the chariot of the sun represents good fortune in any form. Okay. Number 8, justice suggests that no success in life may be easily attained. Number 9, the hermit shows that the good intentions of the individual are frequently misunderstood and work against him. Number 10, the wheel of fortune picks the ups and downs of life. Number 11, strength symbolizes endurance in an individual. Number 12, the hanged man obviously portrays death in its worst form. Number 13, death portrays loss in various forms, whether it be the loss of life, or money, or reputation. Number 14, temperance suggests that the reaction results from careful thought and results in reward. Number 15 is the devil. Symbolizes the self-indulgence of mankind in every form. Number 16, the tower struck by lightning. Signifies the ordeals that arise in daily life and challenge one. Number 17, the star. Suggests hope and optimism for the individual. Number 18, the moon is strictly illusion and represents self-deception. Number 19, the sun promises reward to those who accept the challenge of life. Number 20, judgment restates the fact that whatever must be will be, that life cannot be changed, it can only be accepted. Number 21, the world is a card of good fortune which promises good hopes and desires for the future. And the other 52 cards are called the minor arcana. They're very similar to our playing cards and four suits. They resemble the traditional deck playing cards. Pinnacles represent material problems, money, business, and travel. The wands stand for friendship and partnership. The cups symbolize love, marriage, and personal relationships. And the swords, they warn against disappointment and delay in life. And of course, each deck is divided into king, queen, the knave, and numbered cards 1 to 10. And elaborate readings of tarot utilize both the major and minor arcana cards. All right. I like this next sentence, and we'll stop here. But the tarot purists claim that persons should possess a deck for their own personal readings and should perform no more than one reading per month. Okay. Why only one reading per month? Obviously, you get it, right? Greater chance to fulfill. If you read it every day, it's got to happen that day, right? Yeah. Okay. A little bit of history, a little bit of funniness, but it was a problem in the first century church as well. And there was some, from the early church literature, there were some things that came out of that. Origen in AD 176 called it the work of demons. The Constitutions of the Holy Apostles in AD 275. Avoid independent spectacles. I mean theaters, the pomps of the heathens, their enchantments, observations of omens, soothsayings, purgations, divination, observations of birds, their necromancies and invocations. Lactantius, in the Divine Institutes AD 307, says divination was evil and the inventions of demons. Gregory the Great, it's Epistle 65, considered divination as idolatrous and sacrilegious. What about the Bible? Okay? See a lot of it in the Old Testament, not so much mentioned in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament it was prohibited. Leviticus 19, verse 26, you shall not use enchantments nor reserve times. Okay? Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 12, they were to be driven out of the land. And then in Micah chapter 5, verse 12, have no more soothsayers. They're not supposed to be there. Okay? Don't rely on them. The main reason is it's equated with sin in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verses 1 through 5. The dreamer of dreams that giveth a sign or wonder to serve other gods was not sent from God. He was to be put to death. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 17. You may remember that account. Okay, Hosea is made king of the northern tribe. Eventually, they're taken into captivity. 2 Kings 17 is an account of all the things that they've done, okay, that led them to the captivity. And they were carried away into captivity because they practiced one of the things was divination and enchantments, among many other sins. I point out that at that time in Israel, the northern 10 tribes were carried away into captivity. They were never more to return as a nation, wiped out as a nation. 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 6 talks about Manasseh. He was an evil king in Judah. Among the evils he did was observing times and enchantments. Kind of minor in Manasseh's life. He was very wicked, a very wicked king. Divination is deceitful and stresses success in this life. Jeremiah chapter 14, verse 14. Jeremiah wrote at the end of the southern kingdom's first time on earth, I guess you'd say, right before Judah was carried into captivity. Actually, as they were in captivity, he remained in Judah and wrote, prophesied to the people that remained there. He says, the prophets prophesy lies in my name. I sent them not, neither have I commanded them, neither spake unto them. They prophesy unto you a false vision, a divination, and a thing of naught, and the deceit of their own heart. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. The secret things belong to God. Okay. It's foolishness. And actually, this will get into our last point as well. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 23 tells us that it's not in the way of man to direct his own steps. Okay? We should follow God. Ezekiel chapter 8, interesting encounter. Ezekiel's carried back in a vision to the temple of Jerusalem, digs through the wall, goes through and opens up a door, okay, and looks in. And after declaring the abominations done in the temple, ends with, provoke me to anger, and lo, they put a branch to their nose. One of the many things that they did there in the temple. Hosea chapter 4, verse 12 says, my people ask counsel at their stocks, and their staff declare unto them. About 4 minutes, and I hope we can get through with this last point. I entitled it, The Future Has Been Foretold. Why don't we believe it? The future has been foretold to us, been foretold by the one who is able to bring it to pass. It's the timing of when the events will occur that has not been told to us. Okay? Now let's consider his record. Okay? Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 16. God appeared to Abraham. Abraham had to take the calf, split it into two, okay, and God appeared to him. He told him that his seed would go into a foreign land. They'd be there for 4 generations, right? And then they'll return to this land that he was in, the land of Canaan, and he would give them as their possession. He says, also in that passage, after their servitude, they will come out with great substance, and in the 4th generation, they shall come hither again. Let's talk about the fulfillments of that prophecy that God gave to Abraham. Exodus chapter 12, verses 35 through 36. We all remember the 10 plagues brought upon Egypt, right? all the destruction that took place. We kind of pass over verses 35 and 36. The Egyptians gave them gold, jewelry, whatever they needed just to get them out. Gave them out. That passage ends, and they spoiled the Egyptians. Israel left as a very wealthy nation from the land of Egypt. They were given all the gold, all the silver that the Egyptians had to get them out. Joshua 23 verse 14 says, "You know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you, and not one thing hath failed thereof." It all came to pass what God had told them in the Old Testament. I could have gone with a bunch of other examples, okay? Other prophecies that God has given to us that have been fulfilled. I want us to go to the future, though. John chapter 5, verses 28 through 29. Christ says, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all shall hear his voice, shall come forth. They that have done good to the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation." Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 tells us, "It is appointed unto man once to die, and after that the judgment." How about Romans 14, verse 12? Or 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. Okay? We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ to give an account of the deeds that we've done in our body, whether they've been good or bad or evil. Okay? 2 Peter 3, verse 9 through 10 tells us the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Okay? He concludes in that passage talking about the heavens are going to pass away, okay, with a great noise. The elements will melt with fervent heat. The earth and all the works that are therein will be burned up. Okay? He ends verse 11 saying, "Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness?" In other words, spend your time reading the Bible, knowing what God has asked you to do, and do that. And leave the decks, the tarot decks, the fortune telling behind. This fortune will happen. The other, someone's lied. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.